Good evening. Call to order of the Laramie City Council work session for Tuesday, January 13, 2026. And we will begin tonight's work session with public comment. If there is any public comment on non-agenda items, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, we will go on to our first work session, which is staff presentation on the Reconnect West Laramie Reconnecting Communities Plan. Good evening, Mr. Gabathuller.
Good evening,
I always want to
Mayor.
pronounce the H.
Yep, silent H, but you got it right. Thank you.
Yep.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, today we take an important next step in the Reconnect West Laramie plan. As you know, this plan has been in development for the past year, and this evening we're asking, we're just presenting. Next week we'll be asking for formal adoption of this plan. And just a quick update, last night we presented to Planning Commission, and they unanimously voted to certify the plan for adoption for you all. So we're glad to be in front of you to give an update this evening. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit, this plan is the result of a year-long planning effort funded through a $250,000 grant from the Federal Highway Administration. It reflects not only extensive technical analysis, but also innovative and highly engaged methods of community outreach, which we're particularly proud of in this planning effort. So when we started this plan last year, there was snow on the ground. It was very cold, much different. It was about a year to the day to now, and we were trudging around West Laramie, a nice, I believe it was a 7-mile tour that the consultants from DJ&A and SE Group were brave enough, and some of them were, one of them was from Texas, and one of them was from San Diego, so we did have to duck into the Yumbana gluten-free bakery to warm up at one point on Industry Drive. So we really did cover all the bases over there, and had a nice start to the project, did so many other community engagement events that we saw many of you at, including the signature Freedom Has a Birthday event, farmers markets, events at Wyotech. So in addition to all of those in-person events, we had a robust online presence throughout the project with 2 surveys that Bill, our partner on this project, is going to go over in a little more detail with you this evening, the results there. And all the moments and the conversations that came about through this public engagement effort, we really felt like that's what makes this plan what it is. It is built on real community voices from over there, real lived experiences, and as I mentioned, real time walking and biking with our community bike ride to kind of sum up the effort in the fall is what makes this plan what it is. So as mentioned, the plan addresses long-standing challenges that we all know of, the difficulty in bridging the gap between Laramie, where the railroad, the river, the interstate, Snowy Range Road, all of those things, are obstacles to connectivity, and that's what we addressed in this planning effort. So where the rubber really hits the road and where Bill's really going to hit hard in the presentation that he's going to give is the 37 targeted recommendations organized in a phased and tiered manner, which gives us a blueprint for the future and how we're going to implement this. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Bill up here to give a presentation a little bit more detailed on those recommendations and the effort as a whole.
Good evening, Bill. Thank you.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I'm really excited to share the work that we've been doing and that we've completed in collaboration with city staff, as well as with the community as well, to put together the Reconnect West Laramie project and plan. So a quick refresher, as Philip mentioned, it was about a year ago that we presented at the outset and initiation of this project. At that beginning time period, we identified really 5 key purpose objective statements for the study, focusing on creating intuitive and convenient connections for people of all ages and abilities, from kids to seniors and everyone in between, making sure that it's easy to access and go where they need to go throughout the city. We're looking to, or the objective, to expand access to jobs, to education, recreation services, medical services, especially as well. We coordinated extensively with the 10-year transit plan study throughout our effort and looked for ways for both plans to kind of speak to each other and make sure that they were coordinated in terms of the recommendations and the ideas that are put forth so that they can really build upon each other. We were very multimodal in this process, looking for improvements for pedestrians, cyclists, as well as vehicles. And then last but certainly not least, looking for ways to improve safety, especially for cyclists and pedestrians, as they're the most vulnerable users of the roadway network. A few highlights of our project. As Philip mentioned, we have 37 different improvement strategies identified within the plan that we'll walk through as part of this presentation. But the first 3 numbers on this slide are ones that I'd really like to highlight. We had connections and talked to over 400 different people at in-person pop-up events and different events that we conducted throughout the year across Laramie. We also had over 260 people participate in our 2 online surveys, so really good participation in the surveys and providing input around the needs and challenges that people felt moving and getting around the city, as well as their ideas about the different strategies and how those could be prioritized. And then we conducted more than 10 different stakeholder meetings with different nonprofits, neighborhood groups, YDOT, the university, Wyotech, to understand their needs, their interests as it came to connectivity and mobility as well. So we're all pretty familiar with the different barriers that there are to connectivity within our project area and what separates West Laramie from the west side and the remainder of the city. Certainly, Union Pacific Railroad and the interstate are big constraints. You can only cross them in certain locations, and so that makes it very difficult to make those connections. As I mentioned, that coordination with the 10-year transit plan, there's limited transit accessibility, transit services within West Laramie, making it difficult for people who don't have access to a car to travel to other parts of the city. And then as we look, beyond kind of those big picture barriers, we have, smaller but I think equally as important challenges that people need to face. Crossing Snowy Range Road, even though it's only one street, it's not very easy to cross. There's not a lot of safe opportunities to cross that roadway, especially if you're walking and bicycling. And then multimodal gaps, things as simple as a missing sidewalk on one particular block can really discourage someone from walking or using an alternative mode of transportation to get to where they want to go. So as we looked at those barriers, looked at our technical analysis, started to incorporate input from the community as well, we identified 5 east-west opportunity corridors that really guide the identification of the strategies that are included within the plan. And I'll walk through those in a little bit more detail in a few slides, but did want to highlight a little bit more about the engagement effort that we completed as part of the process. So as I alluded to, we had more than 10 different stakeholder meetings with 10 different stakeholders of various backgrounds, including the nonprofits, YDOT, the university, et cetera. They're listed here on this slide. Got a lot of really great input and feedback from these stakeholders and community members in terms of understanding their constituents and different needs and challenges that they have related to connectivity. two of the stakeholders on here that I'll just highlight because they are certainly very important in terms of project implementation in the future. One is YDOT. We met with YDOT 3 different times through the process to not only understand their needs and kind of parameters around improvements, but also to share the strategies as they were being developed, especially those that either ran along YDOT controlled roadways like Snowy Range Road or crossed YDOT facilities to make sure that YDOT really was on board with what we were proposing and to hopefully have a process as these projects move towards design and implementation where YDOT's familiar with them and that process can be as straightforward as possible. The second one that I'll note is Union Pacific. We've initiated with city staff the initial coordination with Union Pacific. This is a process that I anticipate will be ongoing given the size and kind of process that Union Pacific requires. So it's certainly very much just the start of that coordination, and I think is something that will extend well beyond the termination or duration of this planning process. On the community engagement side, there were 2 primary phases to our community engagement. The first was conducted in the spring of 2025, really focused on understanding needs and challenges from the community in terms of what they want to see for connectivity. The 2 key elements of this engagement, one was engagement that was led by University of Wyoming students, where they were out doing pop-up events, more than a dozen different pop-up events around town, in downtown, at the footbridge. They went to Bud's Bar one evening and talked to patrons within the bar. So really creative and I think, interesting ways to get out into the community and talk to people who don't normally attend open houses and city sponsored events. We also had our online map-based survey, which we had over almost 250 people participate in. A lot of participation from the West Side and West Laramie. For that survey, the city mailed out postcards to all addresses in the West Side and West Laramie to boost participation and make sure that we were hearing from the residents that we wanted to hear from in the West Side and in West Laramie. The second phase of community engagement happened through the summer and into the early fall time period, really focused on pop-up events, going to Jubilee Days, Freedom Has a Birthday, the Farmers Market, other events throughout the summer to share our ideas in terms of the strategies and get community feedback on what they liked, which projects they might want to prioritize, and how they'd like to see the plan move forward. One of the key elements of that engagement, fun elements of that engagement, you'll see in the photo on there, we did a community bike ride that had more than a dozen participants where we rode over the footbridge, around the West Side, through West Laramie, and kind of experienced things from a different perspective, riding bicycles throughout our project area. So I'll talk a little bit now about the proposed strategies, the 37 different strategies that are identified within the plan. We've organized them and presented them by each of the 5 corridors. So we'll start here at the north end with the Curtis Corridor. There's 6 projects overall identified along the Curtis Corridor, really focused on building on the existing infrastructure that's there. There's the existing multi-use path along the south side of the roadway that extends from the Union Pacific, from 3rd Street and the Union Pacific corridor across Interstate 80. But there are certain locations where that pathway is a bit discontinuous, challenging to cross streets on and off ramps. And so we really focused on those locations, the ramps at Interstate 80, the intersections with 3rd and 4th Street to make those crossings safer and more comfortable for pedestrians and cyclists. It also makes those locations better for vehicles because we're proposing improvements such as signage and striping that make vehicles more aware to anticipate and expect that there may be pedestrians and cyclists. So it really helps the operation and safety in those locations for all modes of transportation. The Madison-Flint corridor moves down the next to the south. We have 7 projects identified here within this corridor and really looking to build on the city's current project, the West Laramie Connector multi-use path that's currently in design. And that's shown on this map in the black dashed line, which would connect the Greenbelt Trail at the river across the territorial prison property and then under the existing underpass at Madison into West Laramie. And so we're really looking at that project as being a great central spine for this corridor, and then we're able to build upon it both to the west and to the east with improvements within West Side, responding to comments that we heard from the West Side League of Neighbors as well as residents for an interest in more and safer bicycle and pedestrian facilities within the community so that they can connect to the footbridge and connect to Snowy Range Road. And then including connections to the east once you're across both of those facilities into downtown and then towards the university. The Garfield corridor is the central corridor of the five, and I think one of the key corridors really building on the footbridge as a great existing asset for connectivity within the city and making it easier for people to get to the footbridge, especially by walking and bicycling. So you'll see the improvements to the west. There's 5 different ones focused on Garfield and then along Snowy Range Road, providing safe and convenient pedestrian and bicycle facilities for people to be able to navigate Snowy Range Road, navigate the interchange at Interstate 80, and then also once you move into West Laramie, providing different options for either a facility that could be located along Snowy Range Road or utilizing parallel streets that are a little bit lower stress, have less traffic, and might be more comfortable for people to walk and bicycle. One of the other projects, or 2 other projects that I'll highlight here, project number 6 proposes improvements at the base of the footbridge, basically expanding the pedestrian area at the base of the footbridge to make those landings a little bit more inviting, more of a place at each location so that you're not just coming down the stairs and kind of right into the street. Makes it a little bit safer and more inviting for people to use the footbridge. And then bicycle improvements along Garfield to the east, which help to enhance connections to the university and other destinations east of downtown. The Spring Creek corridor is probably the most ambitious in terms of the scope of the projects as well as their potential cost into the future. The key ones that I'll point out are projects 4 and 5 on this map, which propose 2 options for creating a new overpass of the Union Pacific Rail corridor. One would be project 5 would be a pedestrian and bicycle facility that would provide a connection from the Spring Creek multi-use Trail and 3rd Street across the Union Pacific Railroad and over to the Greenbelt Trail. Project number 4 would be a new roadway that would also have pedestrian and bicycle facilities as part of it, but would make a connection over the Union Pacific corridor and then potentially ultimately underneath the interstate to make a connection over to Adams and Venture Drive, about where the Wyotech campus is. So again, very long-term projects. These are the key projects that require coordination with Union Pacific for their kind of sign-off and approval for being able to cross their right-of-way, but definitely projects that we wanted to have reflected in this plan, so that recognizing that they're long-term, but you need to start that process now for the planning and then ultimately identifying potential funding sources for them as well. And then finally, at the south end, the Riverside Corridor, we do see this as a longer term, 15, 20, 25 years in the future as the city continues to grow in the future. There are certain pieces of infrastructure that are present today, such as at project location number 4, an existing at-grade crossing of the Union Pacific Rail Corridor, and then project number 2, an existing bridge over the Laramie River that could be good building blocks for creation of connectivity, both as a roadway as well as a multimodal corridor in the southern portion of the city, as future development may dictate the need for improvements in this area. And then the 6th area, which wasn't shown on our earlier map, but we felt were just as important as the east-west corridor, are the off-street corridor improvements. These are primarily north-south connections that really help to connect the full scope of the neighborhoods in the west side, in West Laramie, and on the east side of town to those key east-west spines. So a lot of these projects are really, what might be considered low-hanging fruit, easy to implement projects, but they really do provide a lot of benefit to make that connectivity to those larger projects. And in many cases, many of these smaller off-corridor projects could maybe be added on to a larger east-west project to increase its value and increase the benefit that comes from it. And this map just highlights the different locations. As I mentioned, a lot of them are in West Laramie, in the western part of our project area, and then help to make those connections to the key east-west corridors. So we'll talk a little bit now about the tiering of the projects, the process we went through to categorize and prioritize projects that you see within the plan. We looked at several different criteria in order to help identify that prioritization and categorization of projects, whether projects would close a gap and make a real benefit for a longer connected corridor, addressing safety issues, improving comfort and convenience for cyclists and pedestrians, looking for opportunities to leverage near-term city investments such as repaving or resurfacing a street where improvements could be combined with that and implemented in an efficient manner, aligning with our core project goals, which we highlighted at the beginning, and then the input covered up a little bit by the captioning, but the public support and public input as well down there. So that was a key item for us as well. There we go. So Tier 1 strategies that we identified, these are really intended to be or recommended to be kind of the near-term next 2, 3, 5 years for implementation. These projects all received a significant amount of community support, and they all have the opportunity to really serve as a great foundation or backbone for the implementation of other improvements. So you'll see there's almost every project along the Garfield corridor is identified, all but one, kind of reflecting the importance of that Garfield corridor as a central spine and leveraging the benefit that the footbridge provides, as well as some other improvements along the Spring Creek corridor, primarily in West Laramie, to enhance access to Wyotech and build off the improvements along the Garfield corridor, and then improvements along Madison, Flint, and Curtis, really taking advantage of opportunities to look at targeted specific locations that could provide a lot of benefit for the existing infrastructure that's present in those two corridors. The Tier 2 strategies, I think generally all also received a lot of public support and community feedback. Where these projects land more into Tier 2 is a lot of times they will require a bit more coordination and collaboration. So you see the Spring Creek corridors, the two overpass options, which will require coordination with Union Pacific. There's more projects that may require coordination with YDOT because they involve crossings of Snowy Range Road or by the interstate, or they may be improvements that are somewhat dependent upon others. So you see the three off-corridor strategies at the bottom generally would follow on or perhaps be implemented in conjunction with improvements along the Garfield corridor in Tier 1, for example. And then the Tier 3 strategies are strategies that still had public support, but maybe not as much as the projects within Tier 1 and Tier 2. They're also projects that may take a bit longer to implement because of coordination or because of cost, or they're projects such as those along the Riverside corridor that are a bit more longer term in their focus, and they're really dependent on future development and future growth within the city before there's a more significant need for those types of improvements. And then finally, to wrap things up, just kind of go over a little bit the next steps that are included in the plan for the city to pursue. First and foremost is continuing that collaboration and dialogue with Union Pacific, YDOT, and other project partners and the groups that we collaborated with as part of this process. The tiers and the project lists will be a great tool for pursuing additional funding for design and implementation of projects. A lot of times a prerequisite for pursuing outside funding through the state or the federal government is having a plan, an adopted plan that identifies that project. So this plan will allow the city to be able to check that box and pursue funding in an effective way from state and federal sources. Once that funding is identified, then there's the opportunity to move into design, engineering level design. You'll see within the plan there's a lot of concept designs. At this stage, they very much are concepts. There is more detailed engineering required in order to finalize what those projects will look like and how they would be implemented. And then certainly recommending to continue that dialogue and coordination with the community, keeping them involved throughout the process as individual projects move forward. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Councilors, questions and/or comments? Counselor O'Doherty.
This is just a comment that I'm really glad we went out for this, for getting ideas, because someone like me, I mean, just the way that I could never have come up with all of these ideas, and I like how you broke it down into the segments that makes it seem like things are doable, maybe if we can get the funding, but being able to do it in parts. And it never would have occurred to me that it's not just the connection from east to west, but all the things that feed to that connection. So that was cool. So I really love this. Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Vice Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for the presentation, and I am just so excited about the opportunity of all this. I know it's just the beginning, and there are a lot of things that need to be put in place, especially funding to make any of it happen. But I love hearing all these opportunities, and really want to thank you and the staff for all of the input that you sought out from community members. I think there was a pretty good, every time I was at something, there was a lot of community input. And I just so appreciate it. And also, similar to what Councilor O'Doherty said, that the way this is broken up is makes it feel a little bit more manageable. So appreciate that.
Thanks.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you again for the presentation, and I'll echo my colleagues, how exciting. Just for my own edification, when we're talking about something like a pedestrian crossing on Snowy Range, Garfield 4, for example, what does that look like? Are we talking about a light? Are we talking about like a signal?
Yep. Yeah, it could be a number of different items, and so that's one of the things that we've identified and highlighted within the plan is that, at this point, we've identified that need and identified that location as a great location for an improvement, but there is a subsequent step, kind of part of the design effort, that collaboration with YDOT to determine what the exact project may be. And so, yeah, it may be a traffic signal at that location, fully signalizing that intersection. It could be more of a controlled and protected crossing. That could be with the yellow flashing beacons, or the overhead, what's kind of termed the pedestrian hybrid beacon or hawk signal. There's one of those on Grand by the university. So there's a kind of a menu of different options in some locations, and that is a good example of a project that will require additional coordination with YDOT and further study to determine the final improvement for that location.
That is a chaotic intersection. So.
Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity last night at Planning Commission. I'm the liaison, so I listened to this presentation and the next, and I really enjoyed the comments some of the commissioners had brought up. And one of the main ones that really struck me was the bicycles, making sure it's safe. We're an outdoor community. A lot of people ride their bikes or they go walk and things like that, and to make sure that we can protect them and make it even more inviting for them to be able to come across to this side with more opportunities. So I think that's some good, fantastic ideas. So thank you. Thanks.
Further questions or comments? Well, I just want to thank you very much for the presentation. This is extremely exciting. We have been working on this for a while, and a year before that, we were dreaming about this. And to see it beginning to take form is it's just so exciting, and I see so much potential for our town. And the one last comment I would like to make is I just love this Reconnect graphic. And this town loves stickers. And this council loves stickers. And this would make absolutely the best sticker for us to continue to promote this program. So I've got a new notebook and a place for it.
I like it.
Okay. Well, with no further questions, excuse me?
Mayor, I appreciate the presentation tonight. I think it's so well done, and I'm so excited about this project. One of the things that I want to direct you to, as Bill was making the connections about some of the items that we already have in place, we have the West Laramie West Side Connector Project that's creating the spine for what we're working on. A few other connections to try to make for you is Spring Creek Trail Phase 2 is going to be going on, right? Well, that Spring Creek Trail Phase 2, which might come with a Phase 3 with the future SPT project with the Bill Nye allocations. If that's a successful project, will get us all the way down to 3rd Street. And then from that point, remember, it's about staff working on getting the connection from 3rd Street over the railroad and over to the other piece of the Greenbelt, creating another connection. And then the final piece of that that's coming on that you may not all have connected, but one of those avenues that they showed was about Harrison Street and a potential bike lane on Harrison Street. Well, keep in mind that our unpaved to paved initiative that's called out in the specific purpose tax ballot is Harrison Street. And so all of these are starting to come together, and that synergy, that planning, all the work that we've been doing is all going to lead towards great things for this community. Just want to make sure you're aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And now I'll go to the public. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Good evening, Ms. Sindelar.
I feel like a puppy dog. I've been just wiggling all over about this. I'm excited, and that work is happening on the Madison route. That concrete's going in. I haven't ridden out there. It's been wintertime, so I haven't ridden out there yet. What I'm hoping is that while we're building these things, that we can do the little small things, the little connector things, like fixing up the Garfield Street Bridge, the runoff out of that, maybe starting to work and plan on how we're going to cross 3rd Street, making a connection between Spring Creek Russell and Sheridan to the Garfield Street Bridge, probably along 2nd Street. That's a very popular run, and it's wide. There's plenty of room for stuff there. I got that already, and start working now, because it takes a long time to get things through YDOT, on crossing Snowy Range Road. I do it. I was up at 3rd and Curtis today, and I crossed it. I would not want a child anywhere near that intersection or Snowy Range Road. We've got to fix those kind of things, because the vulnerable, if we take care of the vulnerable, it makes it better for everybody. I love y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there any further public comment on this agenda item? Back to council for final comments. Any final comments? All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. Our next presentation is of the 10-year Public Transportation Plan, a collaborative effort between the City of Laramie and the Albany County Transportation Authority. Good evening, Ms. Bork.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm Mary Bork. I am working through the City Manager's office on this study. I was hired in March of last year. The RFQ had already come out, and my first day was the kickoff day for this project, along with our consultants, Mead and Hunt, who we have here tonight. I had a crash course in learning about Laramie, only having been here 4 months. And those 4 months I spent in my house working remotely. And so I hadn't really driven around the city. And so my first opportunity to see it was along with the consultants, in the vehicle with them, going behind buses and checking out the city. This study, again, is a collaborative effort between the City of Laramie and the Albany Transportation Authority. I do have Chair Wheat here from ACTA, if he happens to speak. This particular council in front of me, you've had transportation goals as part of your policy objectives for several years. I can trace them at least going back to 2023. Now that we have the study done. We now are ready for the plan to be before you. I'd like to thank the planning department with the city here with their insistence in helping me with the technical aspects of things, along with our public outreach. And as Bill mentioned, I'd like to thank DJNA. We were able to align our efforts, our public outreach efforts, along with theirs, starting in about March or April. I'd also like to thank the planning department for Albany County. We were able to have our online presence on their website. Planning was able to put it on their webpage at the county. So we had our city outreach online and again on our city Facebook page. A bit of an update, something that we learned last week is that at least the transportation services provided by Laramie Connections is shutting down. And so this lessens the resources that our citizens have, and this plan couldn't have come at a better time. Looking forward, I've been in communications with Albany County, specifically with their grant department, and they're going to want this adopted by the Albany County Board of Commissioners for their purposes of seeking grants in the future. So I'm working on that with them. And then I've also reached out to the university to see what it is that they need moving forward. Again, if they need to acknowledge receipt for whatever it is that they need, they're supposed to get back to me by the end of the week, first of next week. And so we've got those going on. We did put in, we do have an advisory board that helped us along with this. Again, that was comprised of WYODOT and their planning staff from both the city and the county and city engineering. And I have a couple of the board members present from that particular committee if you need any or have any questions of them. Again, I'd like to turn it over to our consultant, Paul Silberman from Mead and Hunt. And Paul's behind me, and he's driven up from Denver, along with Bill. I think, Bill, you came from Colorado Springs.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Zimmerman.
Good evening. Well, thank you very much. We're excited to be here tonight and the opportunity to share this with the council. As Mary said, we were tasked to create a 10-year strategic public transportation plan. It's a very robust vision. We've laid it out in phases. Talk it through tonight. Next slide. So the agenda for this presentation will be just the project overview, our schedule, some of the engagement we did. As Mary mentioned, it did coordinate with the reconnecting projects. We got a lot of great cross feedback. The service concepts that we developed, consensus service concepts that came out of the working group, the advisory committee that Mary mentioned. And then the service plan and implementation, we'll go through that. So the overview was the city and county got a grant from FTA and the Wyoming DOT to do this study to develop a 10-year vision for public transportation in the area. We started in April, documenting existing conditions. We did public engagement from April through about early fall. And most of the fall we worked through the concept development. We had a lot of different options for the different routing and networks. And then we refined that through the working group, the advisory committee, and then we're here tonight to share our plan and ultimately to get it adopted. We do have the technical reports available. I believe they're posted for further detail. Next slide. So a little bit about existing conditions. There are a number of transit services already operating in the area, most notably the Roundup, the university-run service. You can see the bus stops in blue and the routes from downtown around campus and stuff. There are some other service types, on-demand or paratransit service like Safe Ride and the Epson Center. As Mary mentioned, Laramie Connections is not going to be an option moving forward, but there are some services already out there, but there are definitely a lot of gaps and needs that are unmet from what we heard, and we'll get into that. Next slide. Some of the gaps that we identified in our existing conditions research was no connection to West Laramie, which, as you've heard in the previous presentation, over 6,000 residents, 1,000 jobs, educational institution. There's no fixed route service on the weekends. There's no north-south service. through town. There's no service to the Greyhound stop. There's no service to the airport. There's only one stop downtown. There's no evening service in the summer. There's no service to the hospital. So there's some major gaps in what's out there today. It's really a skeleton network, but it's got good bones. Next slide. We also identified transit markets. That just means segments of the population that would be more inclined to use certain types of transit service. So first and foremost, the students. It's obviously a large college, a major institution in town, not just university, but Wyotech, County Community College. Also a large market for visitors and tourists. There's a lot of recreational areas and outdoor sports and stuff, recreation, and major events that the university and the city host throughout the year. There's residents. There are definitely segments of the population, seniors we already mentioned, but they're disabled. There are other people, lower income, don't have cars. And then there's commuters. We did identify a market definitely that wants to commute to Cheyenne, and even people from Cheyenne that want to commute to Laramie. So there's different transit markets that need to have their needs met through this study and this plan, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So let's talk about our public engagement. Next slide. So we had over a dozen events throughout the study. Many of them were open to the public. Some of them focused on specific transit markets. We did meet with businesses at the Chamber Business Alliance, and we met with older adults. We went to the Epson Center. We had pop-up events, some of the same events that Reconnecting had a booth that were mentioned previously. And then we had our advisory committee that was made up of technical staff from ACTA and other city departments and the university, and they just gave really great, thorough input throughout. You know, we really appreciated their knowledge and thoughts on that. Next slide. We also did one-on-one stakeholder interviews with a myriad of institutions that provide human services and transportation to residents and visitors and other transit markets, from ACTA to the tourism board to Main Street to the airport, and we had some productive calls with Cheyenne MPO and Cheyenne Transit. They're very interested in our work and trying to meet somewhere in the middle. Next slide. Some of the themes that we heard throughout the interviews and the existing conditions was accessibility and affordability. We really want to make transit easy to use for people, whether they're disabled, older adults, those without cars, or lower incomes. We want to make it reliable, go where they need to go, and make it affordable. Frequency and coverage. We heard that I don't want to make it complicated to figure out where's the bus going to be and how do I get it and go through a bunch of apps or reservations. They just want to know the bus comes on this street. It's going to come every 30 minutes or whatever, and it's always going to take me to the same places. We heard a lot about safety. Safety crossing the streets, some of the things you heard in the Reconnecting in West Laramie, but also like at the stops, at the existing and future bus stops, like have them lighted, have them sheltered from the elements, and for people walking or biking to get to transit. Transit alternatives, there definitely was some interest in additional types of transit service, with continuing some of that on demand, like Safe Ride, or that subscription service that you reserve in advance, and we'll talk about that. And we are not recommending in our plan to sunset any of those existing services in the near future. We'll talk about that. Education was something that we heard loud and clear. I think, even going back to when Gem City Grand had stopped running, there was a lack of public awareness that the university buses are for the public, that you don't need to have a student ID or faculty ID to get on it. And we heard that from a lot of people. I didn't know I could ride the bus. So, that's something that's very cheap to do, to educate people about what's already available now. Funding and investment, it costs money to maintain the buses, operate the buses, keep things in good condition, and the supporting infrastructure like bus stops and curb ramps and sidewalks and stuff. And so making sure that level of investment, we heard we didn't want to see another version of the Gem City Grand that runs for a year and then gets sheltered. So that was something we heard as well. Our Public outreach had over 600 unique impressions. Again, we went to a dozen events, 9 of them open to the public. We had 546 written comments, 77 inputs on our online map. So we heard from a lot of people. We intentionally went to markets, segments of the population that, might have a specific need for transit. Certainly, there was some propensity that people that were more interested in transit or likely to use it had some bias and filled this out, and that's very typical. So some of the results you can see in the word cloud there, West Laramie, the university, Cheyenne, were some strong themes that came out of this. We had good demographic distribution in the survey results. It was filled out heavily by people that lived here. Again, a third of the respondents didn't even know that the roundup is open to the general public. We had really high stated preferences that, if you provided public or alternative transit, connecting modes like biking, or better, pedestrian infrastructure, sidewalks and stuff, that they would use it. They would actually use it. And they would actually use it to commute and save them, car maintenance or gas or whatever it may be. So next slide. So that was really encouraging. Talk a little bit about the service concepts. Just to frame this part, this is a 10-year plan, and it's very ambitious, and we understand that, it would take a lot of money to implement it, and we broke it into phases. And so the first phase is 1 to 3 years. We're calling that short term. Then the next phase is 4 to 7 years. We're calling that midterm. And then the next phase is 7 to 10 years, and we're calling that long term. Each of the phases builds on the previous phase. So even the short-term service plan builds on what you have out there right now, and so on and so forth. So this is a graduated plan, and it's very aspirational, but we were tasked through the grant to give a vision, and it is ambitious, and we certainly heard some comments about that last night at the Planning Commission, and we totally understand that, but we wanted to present the full vision, work backwards or forwards with it. So we're going to keep the daytime, the link, express. We're going to add a West Laramie loop in the short term, 1 to 3 years. We're going to adjust the route serving the hospital. We're going to move a stop around the rec center. We're going to add on-street stops for Safeway and Ridley's to make sure those generators are served. And we're going to align evening service on the link and express so that they run longer service hours. Next slide, I'll show you what that looks like on a map. So you can see here the yellow and brown are already the routes that largely the link and express run. We're going to add the orange, which is to West Laramie, and so that will be it for phase 1 with adjusting the service patterns and stops and hours of operation. Next slide. When we get to the midterm, we're going to keep everything from phase 1, and then we're going to add a north-south route on 15th and 9th. And again, we had lots of different, spaghetti and noodle arrangements of the buses running throughout town. This is a consensus on these staged phase routes that the advisory committee working group put together. And we'd keep the routes running throughout the service day, which is 6:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening. And I'll show you what that looks like on a map in the next slide. So again, that's everything you saw on the previous map, and we just added the green north-south loop to it. And so that, again, that gives you that really nice connectivity between the different routes where you can transfer very easily. It's very convenient. Next slide. Looking out to the final 8 to 10 years of the plan, again, we'd keep everything that we had before. We'd add one more loop, which we called the Hospital Safeway. We'd keep the same service hours as all the previous loops. Next slide. And that's blue. And so this is the ultimate build-out network that you would see if you could wave a wand and run the service starting tomorrow. It's not that simple, but this is the ultimate consensus build-out of the transit network. Next slide. So this is just the summary of the statistics before I tell you how many people will ride it and how much it will cost. So again, you can see the 5 routes will run Monday through Saturday. and they'll run 6:30 to 10:30. There's definitely some flexibility if you don't really need them running that late. They average about 7 to 9 miles, which is very reasonable to complete their loop in around an hour or less. We're running, except for the express, which is really the core to the campus, we're running 20 to 30 minutes typically, headways. About 4 vehicles per route are needed, so fleet is definitely an issue, and would have about 12 to 15 new vehicles that would need to be purchased. I'll get into that. Are we doing to take
I have a
questions then?
question
Absolutely.
right now.
Yes.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Could you just describe what the headway is?
So a headway is the time between a bus arriving at a fixed stop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the frequency that it comes, every 30 minutes, 10 minutes, but you know it's going to come at the top of the hour, at the bottom of the hour. Yeah. There is a glossary in the technical report. Mary knows it all by heart. Next slide. Regional connections, again, this is the core network and the core service type, which ideally would be just fixed routes on loops coming at the same time, throughout the day. We heard a lot about the airport. We heard a lot about recreation service. We heard about intercity service. These are add-ons. These are not something we're recommending, in any of the phases specifically, because they need partners and sponsors primarily. We looked a lot at the airport. The airport's a big economic engine for the region, but it's very hard to run a bus another 20 minutes out to the airport for a couple flights, if the flights are on time, and then if they're not, it disrupts the rest of the route throughout the day. So there are subscription models for that, where passengers just make a reservation and they're going to the airport and they get a van like that red one. That's actually from START up in Jackson. Works very well. So we've been talking to the airport about that. For recreational service, we know there used to be a bus to Snowy Range for employees, but we recommend that, working with the resorts, working with National Park, Forest Service, whatever, that they run weekend, year-round or nearly year-round to these, and they use like a subscription type van like in the top right, and you make a reservation and it's co-sponsored by one of those entities. The intercity service, again, we do see a commuter style service. They're doing some of this in places like Pueblo and Colorado Springs, where it's employer-sponsored, and they work with like Enterprise Rent-A-Car and a group of 6 people that work at the same place, and they lease it and get cheap gas and so on. So we see this a couple trips back and forth, both ways between Cheyenne and Laramie. Some type of shared sponsorship between major employers, the state, Cheyenne Transit, something like that, a cost sharing. That's a subscription type service instead of a fixed route. Next slide. So how much is this all going to cost? It definitely comes with a price tag. Just a little bit more metrics to show you how we got some of the costings. So you can see on this table, and this is some of the statistics that you would report out if you were operating this to the Federal Transit Administration for some of the formula funding, but somewhere between 30 to 100 trips a day for each bus. The number of hours they're in service, hundreds of miles. So these buses are going to run about 100 to 150,000 miles a year per route. So we assumed some similarity to what's out there today. No service would be on UW transit holidays. It's 14 days. We don't run on Sundays. We would maintain evening headways, but you can scale those back and you can save, an hour or two of operating costs. We would match the academic calendar for the express, but we would run some other things during summer and school breaks. So next slide. How much does this cost? Oh, sorry, fleet. We're going to do capital costs first. So there are 2 types of buses that we looked at. One's a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper. The buses have to be fully ADA accessible. A 25-foot bus would have a high floor where you would have a lift to get a wheelchair person. A 30 would have a low floor that kneels down and they can come right in. It's a little bit more expensive to do the 30. And so we're seeing investment in stops and shelters. Also, you can't just run buses around and drop people off in a dirt path. You have to have some type of ADA accessible path for them to get to, and that's a real cost. So we see about $1 million for the stop infrastructure, and then the vehicles, depending on which ones you do, either between 3.5 to 4.5 or 4 to 5.5. So there's definitely an upfront capital cost to do this. But again, you're phasing this. You're not buying 15 buses and running your full network in 2026 or 27. Next slide. So how much does it cost to operate this? So again, you have the capital cost, and we'll talk about lead time for buying buses. It's actually really tough to buy a bus. They don't just arrive like the next day. There's a lot of supply chain issues and Buy America issues, but we're looking at a daily operating cost and an annual operating cost of over $1 million per route. So probably about 5.5 to 6 for the ultimate. And that's a lot, and that's in current year dollars. But I want to explain, this breaks down to about $87 an hour. Of that 87, $35 is what we call an administrative fee, because we don't know ultimately how you're going to deliver this service. So a lot of transit systems are run through concessionaires, and so part of that is an administrative fee and a facilities fee, because as the system grows and the number of buses, it can't stay in the university's garages or so. You probably need a separate facility. And this was talked about when the Gem City Grand was looking at their vision plan. So that concessionaire's fee can cover dispatch, administrative, cost of a maintenance facility that you can lease or share to maintain the buses and so on and so forth. You can also scale that back in the rightmost column. That's your cost per hour if you wanted to pull back, cut the evening service at 8:30 or something like that. So there's some flexibility, but yes, at a full build out, it could be six or more $1 million a year to operate. We're going to talk about revenue for that. I would say though that, all transit is subsidized to some degree. There's not a transit system, even in New York or Chicago or Philly or DC, that the fare covers everything. It's always subsidized, and there's a myriad of funding streams to do that, potential revenue sources, and we'll get to that. Next slide. We do recommend charging a fare. We'll get to that too. So what do you get for spending all this money on your rolling stock, your infrastructure, and maintenance and running the buses? You get actually a lot of riders. So we looked at the current ridership levels for the Lincoln, the Express, that's in green. We looked at what you had for the Gem City Grand. We looked at the propensity. Even though people said, oh, I'd do it, I'd ride it, we still looked at typical transit mode share in similar communities, rural communities, based on your demographics and land use. And basically, right now you have about 1,000, well, if you still have the Grand, you'd have about 1,000-ish riders a day. This will take you between 2,500 to 3,000 riders a day, or 750,000 riders per year. And that's a really strong, robust rural transit system. It's up there with some of the other, town peer cities we looked at, Cheyenne, Taos, some of the Colorado mountain towns. Next slide. So how would you operate, fund, and govern this thing? Next slide. We have a myriad of delivery styles. So the fixed route is your core network that's going to run on the same streets, same stops every day. Some of the subscription services we talked about, they're add-ons. They'll be sponsored and shared by other partners. And then the on-demand. We're not recommending to consolidate the Safe Ride, the Epson Center 211. We didn't recommend to close Laramie Connections. That was their decision. But we want to keep that and evaluate in the future if it should be consolidated into a single microtransit. Microtransit is a little bit of a mirage. Of course, if you ask anybody, do they want door-to-door van service? Of course they're going to say yes. Who wouldn't? It's the most convenient. It will get great ridership, but ultimately it will cost you more and more, because per trip to take people point to point is just more expensive than running a larger bus and making them walk a block or two. So we do have a myriad of delivery styles. Next slide. The fare strategy. So, there are a lot of fare-free systems. There's a lot of jurisdictions that have decided that they're going to do fare-free transit. We recommend charging a fare here. $1 to $2 per day. You could do reduced fares for seniors, youth, low income, or monthly passes or whatever. But that could get you 20% of your operating cost at the ridership you're looking at. So, you could do a pilot that's free. You could do, certain holidays, but different payment mediums. But we definitely support running it and operating it with a fare. It is a service that people are willing to pay for up to a certain price point, but then there will still have to be some investment as a public good. Next slide. So the fleet, the facilities, we talked about this, 2 vehicles, 5 vehicles, another 5 vehicles, you purchase them over time. An option is to lease. You could lease some of these buses for $10,000 to $15,000 a month. If you purchase them, and I'm not even talking about the electric buses with all the tracking and GPS and the bells and whistles, but the purchasing, it's lead time 18 to 24 months. There's a huge backlog still post-COVID with supply chain, Buy America clauses. Investing in those first last mile enhancements, bike racks, ski racks possibly, for some of the regional connections, the pedestrian infrastructure, the mobility hubs where you could have a bike rack at a bus stop, et cetera, and then that maintenance facility. We did not explore in great detail where a maintenance facility could be. We want to talk to the university, the city, the county, look at their different maintenance yards and see what's out there. Next slide. So what we're saying is also phased governance. So in phase 1, the university would continue to operate the Link and the Express and the Safe Ride. We would add the West Laramie route, and during phase 2, we would explore the creation of a regional transit authority. We did hear last night, there's some statutes that, because it may not be state statutes, because it may not be self-sustained funding, there would be time to work through that and look at that. A partner would be the city, the county, the state, the university. And then ultimately by phase 3, you would have an independent public entity. You still could go concessionaire, especially if you're leasing the buses and you're paying that administrative fee in your hourly operations. It's definitely going to take more management and administration to, especially when charging a fare and you've got to report out all the money you're collecting. So it's probably not something one agency can completely take on independently. Next slide. And then funding. We identified a suite of funding. Some of them will be grants. Some of them could be mill levy, property taxes, sales taxes. I know some of these are tapped for the time being right now. Public-private partnerships. There's still grant funding out there. There's going to be a reauthorization at the federal level. Transit is not going to be cut, despite what they say about it. So, it will take aggressive pursuit of funding strategies, multiple sources you can go after fleet purchase, you can go after ADA and bus stop improvements, you can go after operating costs. So there's a lot of options out there to get you to that and you don't need $6.5 million on day one. Again, this is a phased plan. And I think that was it. I know we had a time limit, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Councilors, any questions and/or comments? Councilor O'Doherty.
Do we know how much UW is spending right now on their transit system? Is that public information? Like how much per year? Whatever.
Yes, we did have the reports they submitted the past couple years. I want to say around $250,000 for their operating costs. Well, they're not running as many hours or miles or stops that we're proposing here. And I'm not sure how they're reporting paying the drivers and that kind of stuff, but.
Further questions or comments? Counselor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I sat through something similar for the Traffic Safety Commission when you were here in the fall with Mrs. Bork, so thank you guys for coming back in front of council. And I think this is something that we have to figure out, and it's so complicated. Hopefully Director Wade can use some of her magic, and we can talk funding and strategies. But I've heard this from the moment I came to Laramie over 15 years ago about the need, and just hearing about Laramie Connections, man, this couldn't come at a better time. And kind of like our city manager said, some pieces are falling into place, and hopefully this is right alongside it. But I'm really excited and really appreciate all the time and effort. And I think if we can start getting into that phase 1 to 2 and find the funding to make it work, we really should.
Thank you. Further, Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I serve on our Albany County Transportation Authority, and so just want to thank Mary Bork and you and the whole team for all of your work on this. One thing that really kind of heartened me is it seems that in this plan, West Laramie is kind of prioritized here, just knowing that there's really nothing out there. I live out there, and it is quite hard if you're on foot or otherwise not in a car. And so, yeah, when I saw this presentation, I think it was before the holidays, this really heartened me, and it is ambitious, and I think it's going to be really hard to fund and, all of those things, but I really appreciated the vision, because I'm not necessarily a vision person, and so this was laid out in a really kind of clear plan that I could understand, and I hope the public feels that way as well, and so just wanted to say thanks. I appreciate it.
Appreciate that. I mean, one thing I mentioned to the Planning Commission last night is it takes time to build a brand, right? And so, if you start with just the West Laramie route, and you educate people and you market it, and then each phase builds upon that, you saw how hard even the Lincoln Express brand, people don't realize, is still open to the public. So, marketing and branding, and creating that awareness is also part of the strategy.
Further questions or comments? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and all the work that went into this. It's a little daunting for me to think about, even in 10 years, these phases, so I do appreciate that you noted this is a very ambitious plan. But the idea of serving West Laramie and then the interconnectedness with the connecting West Laramie as well, and how both the public transportation system and then other multimodality kind of transportation could interconnect is really exciting. And so I would love to start thinking or trying to seek out and find ways that we could find some funding. It is not cheap, clearly, but there's just such a need on that side of town, with need everywhere, but really there. And so to see both of these things coming together at once is nice, even though still daunting. Thank you.
Further. Councilor Freed?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mayor. A big question. I mean, this to me seems like a public service, and a lot of public services don't necessarily generate revenue. And I know you provided a lot of different ways that you can fund different routes and things that other communities do, and I'm sure there's not a one-size-fits-all, because every community is different. The needs of every community are different. You could keep expanding on that, but big picture, is that true? Public transit is just something that costs money, and it's a social service in your community. So at some point, you either going to have to understand the cost and try to make some of that back and agree that your community is going to pay for this, or is that what you've seen in your experience, or could you talk about that?
I mean, absolutely, and like the Vice Mayor just said, that even investing in your walking and biking infrastructure, that people can get to bus stops, builds that ridership, builds that multimodal system. I think some of the language that went into the grant was that, economically healthy, viable communities have transit. It helps people, it helps attract jobs, it helps people get to jobs, it broadens accessibility and equity. So, it does have a net positive benefit, but it takes time to realize that, and it's measured in different ways than just the cost of, fueling the buses and paying the drivers. So, it's harder to get the operating money than it is to get money for capital and supporting infrastructure. There's a push to allow some federal funding to cover that. That's what happened during COVID. And then as that money dries up for operating, you're seeing a lot of transit agencies, well, they're trying to save operating costs and scale hours back. But, I think the best recipe for building ridership is to run reliable, frequent service on a core fixed network. You guys have great bones. Your street network, where your generators are, the places people want to go. So, that's why the map looks so simple. But yeah, it's absolutely investment. It's a decision. What is the right sized network and investment for each community? It's a different answer, but we do see this in other places, willing to make that investment in public good.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, you had a follow-up?
Thank you. Kind of to build on what Councilor Freed had said, in the conversations that you had with community members and specifically with, more business-oriented community members, and perhaps with conversations you've had with other cities, is there much of an appetite for kind of a public-private partnership or something like this, where one of the larger businesses in town perhaps put in money to help pay for costs for their employees? What did those conversations look like, and were they had at all?
Definitely. I'll give you the Pueblo story. They had an area of persistent poverty grant. They had a lot of economic development, manufacturing jobs that was just outside of their municipal boundaries. It wasn't served by their transit system. They had a group of HR managers come together and say, well, we can't hire anyone because they can't get here. They don't have cars, but we need employees to be successful, and they funded some of the subscription services. We've seen a lot of downtown development or business associations add a parking surcharge to fund free downtown shuttles and that kind of thing. That's been a very successful model in even small towns and big cities too. I think the stakeholder interviews, showed a willingness to support this. I think if you bring a specific proposal to them and a share opportunity, I would just caveat that depending on the grant fund, if you do get some grant funding and you do have to report, how you're spending that money, it might be difficult to mix it and match it. And we sort of got into that conversation a little bit with the university about them running the West Laramie, and how does that mix with the funds they're already getting, because it's not serving, as much the university students. So it's just some math to figure out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor O'Doherty.
I have a couple of questions, if that's okay, Mayor. I'm not clear what a subscription service is. And the other one is, do the big retailers, the ones that get customers dropped right off at their front door, when I go out to Walmart, I see a bus dropping customers off, and then I see people walking from Safeway with all their plastic bags. And so do they contribute to that right now? Walmart?
Not to my knowledge, none of the retailers do. I think that, you could, through a retail tax, a visitor's tax, a rental car or something like that, you could fund some of the transit operations. One thing we have seen also is that you can get, where the stop is serving, you can get contributions for them to improve, put a shelter there, put a bench, put an ADA ramp or something like that. That is very common through traditional site plan, site development review. A subscription service is just another way to say it's like a rented minivan that people subscribe to for regular commutes, whether it's going up on the weekends, to the resort areas, or to Cheyenne for work, or something a little bit further outside of town.
Councilor Freed?
That's my last one, Mayor, I promise.
You're doing good.
Thanks. I'm just curious about what you've seen in different communities where, we have the Albany County Transit Authority, but, this could be a joint partnership between a county and a city, and is that typically successful? Is that what it takes to, a lot of times get some of these big ideas up and off the ground?
It is a very common evolution of transit service. If it starts out, like here, where just the university is just running it within the city's borders, but then you want the bus routes to cross jurisdictional lines, it really does take a compact of local jurisdictions to oversee that and make that happen. And, what we see in really large areas like, say a DC or a Denver or something like that, that regional entity gets spread so big that then they're not serving the local jurisdictions, so then the local jurisdictions come back in and start running, little like neighborhood shuttles or that kind of stuff. So we see the full life cycle of that evolution. So you guys are more, going from a single jurisdiction to somewhat regional. Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. I look at this and I certainly hope it's successful. I think we probably need to expand our vision a little bit. And obviously the 20% that people pay is not going to take care of it. There'll be some grants or federal funding and things like that. That'll be a boost. That'll be a help. I think maybe we're going to have to reach a point where our general fund is not in healthy enough state to take over and fund the ultimate cost of this. I think we may have to consider a campaign to educate the people of Laramie and Albany County that we need to have a portion or a complete 7th cent to make this fly.
Thank you, Councilor.
Can I just add one comment?
Yes.
I think absolutely in a phase one, it will probably be locally funded, right, to get that next route off the ground as a pilot or whatever. You mentioned regional transit aid. You're talking about ACTA or, just in the immediate Laramie, Albany. We talked to Cheyenne, MPO Transit. Think even bigger. Think a southeastern Wyoming regional transit authority that covers Cheyenne and Laramie. You have a much bigger net that you cast and much bigger, agency contributions, that you can generate that revenue and run that service. So think even bigger than 10 years would be my advice.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate Mary and Paul, the work you've done on this, the clarity of the presentation tonight. I think that this is something we really want, we really need, and you've given us kind of the facts of what we're going to have to do in order to get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, is there any public comment? City Manager,
I was just making sure you were going to public comment.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment on this agenda item?
I don't know if I want to go at all.
Yeah, I'm going at all.
Hi, if you can state your name for the record.
My name is Sarah Haugen. I'm Executive Director of the Albany County Tourism Board. 21 years resident this year. My first council meeting in person. Nice to meet you all. So Mayor and Council, I just wanted to thank Mary for involving stakeholders and involving us in being part of this process. And I wanted to speak today to kind of some of the economic offsets that I see with a transit program and you see Cheyenne doing, that they're able to use their partnership between Visit Cheyenne and their transit authority in order to attract group transit, group tour buses, and the things that they're able to do that kind of bring some of that cost down in our minds. I know that I don't have to spend that money, so that decision making is is a little bit different in this case. But it has been very exciting to see the way that they've pivoted to use their trolleys to make events, to bring people to town, to increase the spend within the community and move people around. So I think that that's something that I'd like to bring the council's attention to, and ways that some of those partnerships can increase use within the community. And I was also wanted to mention that I was part of the hospital's community stakeholder meetings today, and transit came up again as a really important aspect of access to healthcare within the community. So that was all I had.
Thank you very much. Further public comment? Nancy and then Linda Devine.
Okay.
Nancy, you go next.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just have a little tiny thing. I love the bus. I take the bus every month. I go up to the doctor's office, and I love the bike racks. The other day, I left the doctor's office and went to the animal shelter. I brought my bike with me, and zoom, I was there. And I didn't get stinky when I was at the hospital. There's an economic advantage that nobody's discussed so far. Right now, we have 30% in the United States people do not have a driver's license. That's a federal figure I found recently. Laramie is higher because we have a lot of students that haven't gotten around to their first car or can't, or their driving culture, they're from another country, and their driving culture, we don't want them driving on our streets like I wouldn't survive in their country if I tried to drive. The economic thing, though, is it's $10,000 to $14,000 a year for the care and feeding of an automobile. That's a lot of rent. So people move to West Laramie because the rent's cheaper, but if their car breaks down, they're stuck. But if they've got reliable transportation, that's $10,000 to $14,000 a year they can spend in Laramie. And I don't know how you measure that, but it's there. And I know, I ride a bike everywhere. I've got a lot more money in my pocket than I do if I had to drive everywhere. You know, I'm putting money now into the car. It is an 89, but 127,000 miles on an 89 Camry, okay? And how much money, if I was driving all the time, how much more I'd be on maintenance right now, how much more I'd be on fuel, my insurance rates would go up, all those things go up. Instead, I got money to go to the coffee shop. I've got money to buy dinner out. Because I choose not to drive. That 10 to 14,000 that's serious. That's serious chunk of change for people that choose not to drive or can't drive.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Linda Devine, and then you're next. I'm just going in the order I saw the hands. Good evening, Ms. Devine.
Good evening, Mayor. My name's Linda Devine. Council members, I'd never make a good business person because I feel like I do everything by my heart and the moral compass. And as I'm listening to the presentations, and I missed part of it on the Reconnect, but I'm glad to see that we are looking at ways to involve West Laramie and the West Side. I just moved to the West Side this summer, and what I've found, I feel like where I live, you've got West Laramie, where a coffee shop is coming in pretty soon, thank God. And then you've got, so we're kind of like stuck right there in the middle, right? And I think, and I went to the open house on the redevelopment that's been rezoned, and it just seems like there's a lot of activity that's starting to go. And I know that folks in West Laramie would really appreciate having that public transport. I try to be careful because I just moved over there and I don't want to speak on behalf of individuals that have lived there, you know, and had family members. But I think it's important for us to really stay focused. I always worry about the fees, although, you know, when I lived in Des Moines, I know I had to pay a fee every day that I used it, and a lot of employers will give out tokens and things like that. So hopefully that would be something. There's also good old advertising, that a lot of buses will have spaces for companies to advertise on, so hopefully those would be some ways. But I appreciate y'all looking at all this. Thank you, City Manager, and keep up the good work. And Monday's Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yes. Thank you. And next. Good evening.
Hi. Good to see you, City Council members. My name is Tim Snowbarger. My ears were burning as I was driving by the building real quick, and so I did want to stop in real quick, not knowing the meeting was happening. So I am currently the Executive Director of Laramie Connection Center, and so I wanted to bring a little bit of clarity as we are in the process of making some news more public, but understand that just want to be here to kind of help you understand, first and foremost, it has been a great privilege of ours to serve the community in this particular vein through our free non-emergent medical and lifestyle transportation services that unfortunately we have, as many organizations have just kind of reached our capacity to be able to sustain that. Really, really excited and have been excited over the course of the last year or so about hearing this particular study, and so great to kind of hear that it's got more than just some hope and it has some traction. And the pieces I would just want to mention to you is just that it's clear that the need continues. The biggest thing for us, I think, that we discovered, foolishly stumbled into, naive enough to take it on in some regards, is the continued need primarily for the out-of-town transportation as well. That has been the component that we have found, and it hurts my heart the most that we're unable to be able to sustain that, because over the course of the last couple of years, and as I've stood before the council and county commissioners as well for the community partner funding, which has been unbelievable, and I pray that there will still be funds for that to push toward this particular service for our community. In those numbers and that data, and I'll just use rough numbers, that the last 3 years or so we were averaging kind of right at that 3,900, 4,000 rides for the year. Within that number, though, was definitely a large portion, upwards of 350 to 400 rides that we were providing out of town, Cheyenne, Fort Collins, Loveland, and primarily for medical appointments. Just not having any other service available, we often ask questions, how would you have gotten to these appointments had we not been able to help out? And many of the responses, especially early on, 5 years ago when we started, it was void of service. They would just cancel the appointments, couldn't make it there. And for us at that point, though, we tried to figure out how that could be a non-negotiable. So within the conversation, hearing some of the pieces also about regional transportation, however that can continue to maybe be on the radar is a huge thing. We're answering a lot of those questions right now, and there's a handful of volunteers and people that I think just still have that deep of compassion. We'll try and figure out how to do some of that. Also, then, just to speak on clarity, just kind of about Laramie Connections, there is a strong likelihood that because of some of the realities that we'll probably be dissolving on the compassionate ministry side of things that we have. We also still have a church presence, Laramie Connections Church, and so those services, including our free meals on the weekends, those we do have the ability to continue supporting those. That being said, there is some rumblings. There's nothing definite in the works yet, but hopefully within the next couple months there might actually be another organization in town that may be willing to take on that burden that we have served. So just wanted to kind of bring that. Also wanted to just pause for a minute if there were any questions, because we definitely want the messaging to be positive. It stinks, it's hard, but within the same right, we have a piece about making the right decision, not incurring other troubles or problems or getting into debt or things like that, but first and foremost, thank you so much for giving it the attention, and definitely believe that it continues to be a need. And so with that, I just wanted to be sure and swing in, as I got a quick text message that says, hey, might be worth coming by and just touching base. So hopefully that was honoring and that beneficial. So thank you.
Well, Tim, thank you so much, and I appreciate your stopping in tonight. And I just want to say thank you so much for the 5 years of service that you have provided. You have really, really made a difference. I understand the decision. Things are tough. You cannot be falling into debt, but possibly something will emerge out of this. But bottom line, I just want to say thank you. You've put a lot into this, and you've made a lot of difference to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else with a?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this agenda item? All right. Going once, going twice. This ends the work session part of our meeting, and we will go on now back to council. Do council have any further final comments before we move on to updates? Okay. Oh, Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just, one of our goals we wrote last year, last January was transportation, and the Reconnect West Laramie was in the works already, and I know there's been ideas on the transportation, but it's neat to see some fruition and the planning. And there's a 173-page document in there, and there's several that they put a lot of time and effort into, which I really appreciate. And there's a lot more information than they can even share in an hour. So I encourage us all to try to dive in even a little bit more. But I'm excited.
And I appreciate you saying that, because as new members of council, you have now been a part of seeing something go from the dream state to the planning state to the report, where we can actually think about what we might do and how we might get there. So that's cool that you commented on that. Councilors, updates. Do I have a volunteer to start? Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, the Traffic Safety Commission met, and we reaffirmed, I don't know if that's the correct term, Ms. Sindelar for the board chair of the Traffic Safety Commission, and we have a new member who's at the Albany County Sheriff's Office, so that's really exciting. The Parks, Trees, and Rec Board will be meeting tomorrow to talk about funding, which is really exciting too. And we have 4 vacancies, and we'll have some interviews in the next couple weeks for the Parks, Trees, and Rec Board. And the mayor and I got to work with Councilor Lockhart today for an interview for the Planning Commission, and there's a couple more interviews coming up. So thanks, Councilor Lockhart, for getting us in there. And then next week, the Range Advisory Commission will have a special meeting. So that's it.
And when is that meeting, the special meeting?
Mayor, that is Thursday the 22nd at 1 p.m. at the MOC.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
May I also, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. What is the special meeting about? Do you know?
I believe it's to talk about the ongoings of the ranch and some of the contracts and implementations that are happening.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you for the 2-week break. I do want to say that it was nice. I think hopefully most of us got refreshed. As Councilor Freed said, we had the interviews. We have 1 opening, and we have 3 candidates, so we'll finish that up next week. For the Planning Commission, had a Planning Commission meeting last evening, which was this that we saw this evening. So for the most part, so it's kind of neat to see it. It's always neat to see it before it comes to our way, Mm-hmm. And then URA today had their 2 open houses on the West Side project for the 4G property. So with me getting the bean all put together right now, I'm kind of hammered. So I didn't get to go to the one at 11, but I was able to stop in there before this meeting tonight. And Mr. Schmeckel said they had a great turnout, lots of good comments, and which was fantastic. So I'm excited.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Newman.
No updates.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I have just a couple updates. Most of my boards and commissions aren't until later this month, but I also attended the URA meeting. Must have just missed you because I was there earlier, and good turnout, but apparently it was even better earlier today, so that's great news. I'm glad to hear we're getting feedback from folks. And then the mayor and I, city staff, met with folks from UW maybe last week. I can't even remember at this point, but a really good conversation, positive. I'll let the mayor build on that. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Let's see, I attended Finance Committee, you forgot that, and I just want to comment that our new system and the notations that individuals in accounting are making a 32-page spreadsheet so much easier to read. There are fewer questions. I understand the notation. So thank you for that, Director Wade, and your department. We did on Wednesday, the 7th, meet with UW top administrative individuals. So representing UW was Tara Evans, Bill Mai, Mike Smith, President Seidel, and Keith, the Vice President of Finance and Budget. And Aaron.
Alex.
Alec. And also Aaron. Olson.
Yeah.
Okay, Aaron Olson. And then representing the city were Todd, the vice mayor, Director Wade, Director Webb, and myself. And personally, I think it was very productive. It was candid. It was open. And we asked, what can we do better? What would help? You know, trying to open those channels of communication. And I think it was a great first meeting. And I look forward to continuing that where we're communicating rather than people within divisions talking and it not getting communicated among people that are at top administration. Then Councilor Shumway, O'Doherty, and Nancy Bartholomew and I got together and began writing up our National League of Cities summaries, which I couldn't find my book, but I know where it is, and I'll get my summaries added, and then we'll have a written summary to hand out to you all in the next 2 weeks. Then Todd and Brandon and I met with Derek Teeney to talk about a work session on code and planning changes and to really tie some of that down. And I think kind of toward the end, we are looking at giving us the vision, kind of the big plan, the vision, coming down to projects within that vision, and then how that relates to resolutions, ordinances, and legislation that we all participate in. So to kind of give us that connected view of what we do every week. I attended the LCBA luncheon, the annual members meeting, and that was real productive, you know, to meet and greet a lot of people, and I'm hoping I found a few donors for WHAM. Then the Albany County Housing and Land Trust had a subgroup meeting with the county to look at the possibility of city-county partnership for a state grant that has a rather quick turnaround, and the county is willing to work with us, and so we're seeing if it makes sense for us to move forward with that. Then, just to let you know, the city manager and I try to touch base every Tuesday to make sure we're on the same page and that I'm not getting ahead of my skis. We did the Planning Commission interview, and I did attend the Lincoln Center URA open house today. It was packed. I had great conversation with some of the people there, and there were a lot of good questions, and people are starting to feel excited as they see more concrete representation of our planning. I think it makes a big difference that we get out there and that we meet with people and that we have these open houses. So I had just a number of people positive about that. Tomorrow, we will have the vice mayor, city manager, and I will meet with our quarterly meeting with the president. And we feel that those are different than meeting with the top administrators, that with the president, it's more visioning, what can we do together, exploring things, where the other one was more problem and solution focused. And I would just like to remind everybody that West Side will be celebrating their placement on the National Registry on Friday at 5:30 p.m. at the Lincoln Center. So that also was a project that many of us were involved in and that we have seen come to conclusion. So, and then Councilor O'Doherty.
I met with the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities last Thursday, and the group has decided they elected a new president, Andre Fecteau. He's going to continue as president, and Sam Burkett as vice president. They want to work on this year on accessibility for voting and make people with disabilities aware of what's there for them, but then also meet with Clerk White about their perspectives on what are obstacles to voting. And so they would like to do their tabling this summer and talk about, you know, what options are there for people with disabilities to help vote, and learn what are their obstacles that the clerk might not know about. And then I met with the Juvenile Services Board. They met with the state folks that administer that program, and I was just there as like a fly on the wall, but it's a really beautiful thing to see how thoughtful the process is for helping to divert youth from like the system so that they can have productive lives. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. Two or three things. First of all, tomorrow, or actually Thursday at 1:30, we're going to be meeting.
11:30.
11:30? I'll be there. We're going to be meeting to talk about all of the plans that we have for celebrating the 250th year since the United States became a country. Looking forward to that. We're going to have lots of great ideas that we'll jump on quickly so that we're ready to celebrate big time. The other thing is, in your boxes, we talked about having the executive summary in your boxes. You're going to find some material that we brought back from the National League of Cities in Salt Lake City. Also, a lot of the staff has received a lot of information, which hopefully will be very helpful for them, that we've distributed, and we're going to continue to put all this together so you'll see our executive summary. The Laramie Youth Council met on Wednesday of last week, and we are continuing to work towards a training that they're organizing for mental health and for helping people with students with depression and those sorts of mental health things. They're, I think pushing hard. They're busy students. The students that we have on the Laramie Youth Council are very academically focused, but they're determined to make sure that we make an impact with the groups that we're meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Last Tuesday, I went to the Laramie Police Advisory Board for Counselor Bowling, which was really great. We heard about the Albany County Court Supervised Treatment Programs, the juvenile programs in particular, and so that was really awesome to learn about. They elected new leadership. Not a lot changed there. And then today, I had LPAC. And so LPAC has been going through some leadership transitions this past 6 to 9 months. And so there's some new folks on that board that I got to meet tonight, some prospective new members, and kind of just figuring out direction and funding sources. City manager, I might get with you at some point just to go over a couple of things regarding that piece. And then I have Human Rights and Relations tomorrow. And then next Friday, the mayor and I have Laramie Town Gown Association. And then speaking of NLC, I will be going to the NLC conference in Washington, D.C. over spring break in March. And so I'm very excited for that. Hopefully it's a little warmer than thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few updates. Councilor Freed, I just responded to the PTA Advisory Board doodle, so thank you for that reminder. The Emergency Planning Commission has been postponed till February so they can line up some presenters. Rifle range should be tomorrow. Councilor Vigil, thank you for attending Police Advisory. I also forwarded the 2026 LPD training schedule to all of council. If that's something that anyone is interested in looking at or participating in, I'm happy to help kind of coordinate that through the LPD. I also am going to be trying to work with members of the Youth Council around some of the issues that Councilor Shumway addressed just now around finding access to some spaces where they are able to meet regularly and more informally. Perhaps not necessarily as youth council, but in the larger idea of a mental health resource club. So we'll be connecting them with some resources, hopefully at the Civic Center. And I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. I forgot last Thursday the Railroad Depot Board met for the first time of the year and elected a new board chair, but not a lot of news there. The building looks really great.
Okay. And last but not least, the Vice Mayor and I would like to remind you all, as well as myself, that about our fundraising that we need to be doing for WHAM. And I do best when I have an end date. So we have decided January 30. We need your stuff in. By then, if you could start posting any, and maybe you could redistribute that
spreadsheet. Yeah,
that spreadsheet. The Vice Mayor has put together a spreadsheet.
Well, I'm going to correct you. Nancy put together a spreadsheet.
Under the guidance, under the request of the Vice Mayor, has put together a spreadsheet. And if we can get that back out to council, if you can keep that in a place where you can get to it and start filling it out, we need to jump on this. And I've got a lot of possibilities and I haven't nailed anything, so it's time for me to get to work on mine too. So if we can have everything, if our target date is January 30, everything in. So get out there and ruffle those bushes. And that's it. So shall we look at the agenda for next week?
Mayor?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to let you know, Director Teeny let me know earlier today that he does need to pull 9E off the agenda, letter of support. After further review, it was noted that they did not need to request this letter of support, so.
Okay, so that will be pulled off. Thank you. So as you look at this, is there anything on the consent agenda that a counselor would like moved to the regular agenda? All right. Seeing no suggestions there, if we can go to the regular agenda. Any questions or concerns? All righty. Thank you so much for all your good questions and participation. We are adjourned.